I remember the exact moment my world shattered. It was a Tuesday afternoon, ordinary in every sense, until Ethan, my 10-year-old son, dropped the bombshell. "Mom, I locked the basement door," he said, his voice innocent, unaware of the chaos he had just unleashed. My heart skipped a beat. The basement, Nathan's sanctuary, the place he retreated to every evening, claiming he needed time for his woodworking projects. But today, he wasn't alone. Today, my sister Rachel, the golden child in our family, the one who could do no wrong, was with him. They thought they were clever, sneaking around while I was supposed to be out with Ethan. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. My name is Claire Montgomery. At 32, I thought I had my life figured out. A stable marriage to Nathan, my college sweetheart, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and our son, Ethan. I had always wanted a bigger family, but life and my relationship with Rachel had made me reconsider. Growing up, it was always Rachel this, Rachel that. Our parents doted on her, ignoring my achievements, my struggles. I never wanted Ethan to feel that kind of neglect, that sting of favoritism. As I stood there processing Ethan's words, a storm brewed inside me. Rage, betrayal, disbelief, they swirled in my head, each emotion more overpowering than the last. Nathan and Rachel? It was like a sick joke, a plot twist in a trashy novel. I needed to see it for myself. I needed to confront them. But as I moved towards the basement door, I stopped. No, they didn't deserve the satisfaction of seeing me break. They didn't deserve my tears, my anger. In that moment, a cold, hard resolve settled over me. Let them stay there, locked in their den of deceit. Let them wonder, panic even, when I didn't come to their rescue. Ethan's voice snapped me out of my reverie. "Mom, are you okay?" I forced a smile, my heart aching for my innocent child, caught in the middle of this sordid affair. "Yes, honey. I just remembered we have that picnic today, remember? Just the two of us." His face lit up and guilt gnawed at me. I was about to drag my child into my plan for revenge, but it was too late to turn back now. "Let's get going," I said, my voice steady. As we drove away from the house, I couldn't help but glance at the rearview mirror, half expecting Nathan or Rachel to come running out, calling for us to stop. But there was nothing. Just the quiet suburban street, basking in the afternoon sun, oblivious to the drama unfolding in my home. The picnic was a blur. Ethan chattered about school, his friends, the new video game he wanted. I nodded and smiled, but my thoughts were elsewhere, on the betrayal that had uprooted my life. As we laid out our spread on the grassy field, Ethan's laughter ringing in my ears, a part of me wondered if I was doing the right thing. But then I remembered their laughter, their whispers, the way they thought they could make a fool out of me. No, this was just the beginning. Rachel and Nathan had crossed a line, and there was no going back. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I made a silent vow. I would make them pay. They would regret the day they underestimated Claire Montgomery. The next morning dawned with an air of pretense, as if the sun itself was trying to brush off the darkness of the previous night. I had barely slept, my mind replaying the scenario over and over again. Nathan and Rachel, locked in the basement, the secret they thought they had so cleverly hidden now laid bare. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls from Nathan. I watched it ring, feeling a twisted satisfaction in ignoring his desperate attempts to reach me. Let him stew in his guilt and fear. Ethan, oblivious to the storm brewing, munched on his cereal. "Is Dad still in the basement? He sure loves that place," he remarked innocently. I forced a smile, hiding the turmoil inside. "Yes, he's very busy with his projects," I lied smoothly. As Ethan left for school, I braced myself for what was to come. The confrontation was inevitable, but first, I needed answers. I needed to know how deep this betrayal ran. I dialed Rachel. She picked up on the first ring, her voice laced with panic. "Claire, oh my God, you won't believe what happened. Nathan and I got locked in the basement. It was so scary." Her feigned innocence fueled my anger. "Really, Rachel? How terrifying for you," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. She hesitated, sensing my mood. "Claire, I can explain. It's not what you think." "Oh, I think it's exactly what I think. How long, Rachel? How long have you been sneaking around with my husband?" There was silence on the other end. Then a soft sob. "It just happened, Claire. It wasn't planned, I swear." I laughed bitterly. "Just happened? You expect me to believe that? I'm not a fool, Rachel. she cried, now her sobs loud and unconvincing. Please, Claire, you have to believe me. It was a mistake. A mistake? No, Rachel. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk at the store. This is a choice to betray your own sister. I hope he was worth it. I hung up before she could reply, her sobs still echoing in my ear. I felt a rush of power, of control. For once, I was not the overlooked sister, the one left in the shadows. I was the one calling the shots. But my triumph was short-lived. The reality of what had happened, of what I had lost, began to sink in. Nathan and I had built a life together, a family, and now it was all crumbling down, like a house of cards in a gust of wind. I looked around the house at the photos on the walls, the memories we had created. They now felt like a mockery, a cruel joke. I had been living a lie, and the truth was a bitter pill to swallow. But swallow it I must. There was no going back now. Nathan and Rachel had made their choice, and I had made mine. The path ahead was unclear, fraught with pain and uncertainty. But one thing was certain. I would not be the victim in this sordid tale. I would write my own ending, and it would be one of triumph, not defeat. As I gathered the photos, tearing them from their frames, a plan began to form in my mind. Rachel and Nathan had taken everything from me. It was time to return the favor. The day unfolded with a deceptive calm, the normalcy of my routine clashing with the turmoil within. But beneath the surface, my mind was a whirlwind of plotting and planning. Today was the day I'd set my revenge in motion. I had arranged for Ethan to spend the weekend at a friend's house. He deserved a break from the tense atmosphere at home, and I needed space to enact my plan without his innocent eyes watching. I called Tyler, Rachel's son from her first marriage, and invited him over. Tyler, a quiet 15-year-old, had always been close to Ethan, more like a brother than a cousin. There was a maturity in him, a certain depth that came from dealing with Rachel's antics all his life. "Hey, Aunt Claire," Tyler greeted me, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "Is everything okay?" I sighed. "Tyler, I need to talk to you. It's about your mom and Nathan." His expression hardened slightly. "I'm not surprised," he said, a note of bitterness creeping into his voice. "Mom's always been like this." I was taken aback by his candidness. "You know?" He nodded. "I've seen her do this before, with my stepdad. She thinks nobody knows, but I've seen enough." His words confirmed my worst fears, and I felt a wave of sympathy for the boy. "I'm planning something, Tyler. A picnic this weekend. I need your help." Tyler's eyes narrowed, understanding dawning. "You want to leave them alone at the house," he surmised. "Yes," I admitted. "I want them to be exposed for everyone to see them for who they really are." "I'm in," Tyler said without hesitation. His loyalty to me over his own mother was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. The weekend arrived, and everything was set. The picnic was a ruse, a way to get everyone out of the house except Nathan and Rachel. I made sure they knew about it, dropping hints about how I'd be out the whole day, the house empty. As we left for the picnic, I saw Rachel's car pull into the driveway. My heart raced with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. This was it, the point of no return. Tyler was unusually quiet during the drive. As we set up our picnic spot, I noticed him staring into the distance, lost in thought. "You okay, Tyler?" I asked gently. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. I can't believe she's doing this again. To you, Aunt Claire." I reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this." He shook his head. "I'm not sorry. I'm glad I can help expose her. Maybe then she'll realize." His voice trailed off, but I understood. Tyler, like me, was seeking closure, a way to deal with the betrayal that had upended our lives. As the day wore on, I found myself checking my phone constantly, waiting for the call or message that would signal the unraveling of Nathan and Rachel's deceit. But nothing came. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows on the ground, Tyler spoke up. "Do you think it worked?" I nodded, a grim sense of satisfaction settling in. "Oh, it worked. Tomorrow, their little secret won't be so secret anymore." And with that, we packed up, leaving the serenity of the picnic spot behind. I was ready to face the consequences of my actions, ready to watch as the lives of those who had wronged me came crashing down. The following morning, I woke up to a sense of eerie calmness, the kind that often precedes a storm. Today was the day everything would come to light. Today, Nathan and Rachel's deceit would be exposed for all to see. I drove back home, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. As I approached the house, I saw Rachel's car still parked in the driveway. A sly smile crept across my face. They had taken the bait. I entered the house, the silence greeting me like an old friend. No sign of Nathan or Rachel upstairs. I made my way to the basement door, my steps deliberate. The moment of truth was upon us. As I opened the door, the scene that unfolded before me was more satisfying than I had dared to hope. There they were, Rachel and Nathan, disheveled and frantic, realizing their secret rendezvous had turned into a humiliating trap. "Claire!" Rachel exclaimed, her voice a mix of surprise and fear. "Oh my God, we were locked in here. It was an accident!" Nathan stood there, silent, his eyes avoiding mine. The guilt was written all over his face, confirming what I already knew. "An accident? Really, Rachel? You expect me to believe that?" I sneered, my voice dripping with contempt. Nathan finally spoke, his voice weak. "Claire, I'm so sorry. It's not what you think." I laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Not what I think. I think it's exactly what it looks like. My husband and my sister betraying me in my own home." Rachel stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Claire, please, you have to understand. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." "A moment of weakness?" I echoed, my anger boiling over. "No, Rachel, this was a choice to betray your own family." Nathan reached out, attempting to touch my arm. I recoiled as if his touch burned. "Don't you dare," I hissed. "You've lost the right to touch me, to even speak to me." I could see the shame in his eyes, the realization of what he had lost dawning on him. But it was too late. The damage was done. "Get out," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Get out of my house, out of my life. I never want to see either of you again." Rachel sobbed, her cries echoing in the empty basement. "Claire, please, I'm your sister." "You were my sister," I corrected her, my voice void of any warmth. "Not anymore." With that, I turned and left them there, their pleas and apologies fading into the background. I had done it. I had exposed their betrayal, and in doing so I had reclaimed my power, my dignity. But as I closed the door behind me, a wave of sadness washed over me. My marriage, my family, the life I had built, it was all in ruins. And yet there was a strange sense of freedom in that destruction. A chance to start anew, to build a life that was truly mine. As I sat in my living room, the silence no longer felt oppressive. It felt like a blank canvas, waiting for me to paint my new beginning. The aftermath of the confrontation left a bitter taste in my mouth. As much as I yearned for justice and retribution, nothing prepared me for the hollow victory that followed. My home, once a haven of love and warmth, now felt like a barren wasteland tainted with betrayal. I was in the midst of packing Nathan's belongings when my phone rang. The caller ID flashed a number I didn't recognize. Hesitantly, I answered, "Hello? Mrs. Montgomery? This is Officer Daniels from the local police department. We've received a complaint about a domestic disturbance at your address. Is everything all right?" My heart skipped a beat. So it had come to this. Nathan or Rachel must have reached out to the authorities. I composed myself. "Yes, everything is fine now. There was a misunderstanding, but it's been resolved." "Are you sure, ma'am? We can have officers come by to ensure your safety." "No, that won't be necessary. Thank you, officer." I hung up, my mind racing. This was far from over. The scandal of our family drama was now a matter of public record. I wasn't surprised when the gossip started. Whispers at the grocery store, pointed looks from neighbors. The once friendly community had its claws out, ready to pounce on the latest piece of juicy news. But I refused to be cowed. I walked with my head held high, refusing to give in to the shame that others expected me to feel. I was the victim, but I refused to play that role in their sordid drama. The real blow came a few days later. Tyler came to visit, his face etched with worry. "Aunt Claire, I heard my mom and Nathan are spreading rumors about you, saying you locked them in the basement out of jealousy." Anger flared within me. "Jealousy? They have the audacity to twist the story?" Tyler nodded, his eyes filled with anger. "They're playing the victims, saying you've gone crazy with jealousy and paranoia." I laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Let them talk. I know the truth, and so do you. Their lies will catch up to them." But as days turned into weeks, the weight of the scandal began to take its toll. Friends distanced themselves, and even some family members questioned my actions. The isolation was suffocating. a constant reminder of the price of my revenge. In a desperate bid for some semblance of normalcy, I reached out to a divorce attorney. It was time to sever all legal ties with Nathan and reclaim my life. The attorney, a sharp-witted woman named Miss Harper, listened to my story with a mix of sympathy and professional detachment. Mrs. Montgomery, while I understand your need for a quick resolution, I must warn you, this will be a messy divorce, especially with the allegations flying around. Are you prepared for that? I nodded, determination stealing my resolve. I want to move on, Miss Harper. I want to close this chapter of my life for good. As I left her office, a plan began to form in my mind. Nathan and Rachel wanted to paint me as the villain? Fine. I would give them a performance they'd never forget. I would emerge from this scandal not as a broken, scorned wife, but as a woman reborn, stronger and more resilient than ever. The days leading up to the divorce proceedings were like navigating through a minefield. Every step I took was met with criticism and judgment from those around me. But I was resolute. I refused to let Nathan and Rachel's deceit destroy me. The day of the first hearing arrived. Dressed in my best suit, I walked into the courtroom, my head held high. Nathan was already there, looking haggard and remorseful. Rachel wasn't present, but her absence did nothing to quell the sense of betrayal that simmered within me. Mrs. Montgomery, my lawyer, Miss Harper, whispered as we took our seats. Remember, stay calm and collected. Let him dig his own grave. Nathan's lawyer was the first to speak, painting Nathan as a victim of my supposed irrational jealousy. Mrs. Montgomery's actions were driven by unfounded suspicions and jealousy. Locking my client in a basement is not only unlawful, but also speaks to her unstable state of mind. I felt my blood boil, but I remembered Miss Harper's words. I remained silent, letting them spin their tale. Then it was our turn. Miss Harper was methodical, her words sharp and precise. My client acted out of self-defense. The evidence of Mr. Montgomery's infidelity is clear, and Mrs. Montgomery's actions, while extreme, were a result of emotional distress caused by this betrayal. The judge listened intently, his expression unreadable. After what seemed like hours, he finally spoke. Given the circumstances, I believe a fair settlement is in order. Mrs. Montgomery will have full custody of their son, Ethan, and Mr. Montgomery will provide alimony and child support. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Nathan's eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of anger and regret. "Claire, please," he began, but I cut him off. "There's nothing left to say, Nathan. You made your choice." As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt the weight of the past few months start to lift. But the battle wasn't over yet. The social fallout from the scandal continued to plague me. Friends I once considered close turned their backs, siding with Nathan and Rachel's twisted narrative. I found solace in Tyler, who had become a frequent visitor. He, too, was struggling with the backlash, especially from Rachel's side of the family. "They're calling you a monster," Tyler said one evening, anger lacing his voice. "But they don't know the truth. They don't know her like we do." I sighed, feeling a kinship with Tyler that went beyond family ties. "Let them talk, Tyler. We know the truth, and that's all that matters." But even with the legal battle won, a sense of unease lingered. Rachel was still out there, spinning her web of lies, and I knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. I needed to be vigilant, ready for whatever she had planned. As I lay in bed that night, I realized that this was far from over. The divorce was just the first step in reclaiming my life. But to truly move on, I needed to face Rachel and put an end to her manipulative games once and for all. The final chapter of my marital saga began on a crisp autumn morning. The leaves had turned a fiery orange, mirroring the burning resolve within me to confront Rachel and end this once and for all. I had arranged to meet her at a local cafe, a neutral ground where we could talk without the shadows of the past looming over us. As I waited, my mind raced with the possible outcomes of this confrontation. Rachel arrived, her demeanor a mixture of defiance and nervousness. "So you wanted to see me?" she began, her voice laced with a feigned casualness. I looked her straight in the eyes, my gaze steady. "Yes, Rachel, it's time we put an end to this," she scoffed. "Put an end? Claire, you've ruined everything. Your paranoia, your crazy accusations." I felt a surge of anger but quickly quelled it. "No, Rachel, you ruined everything. Your selfishness, your betrayal. You destroyed our family for your own desires." Rachel's facade cracked, her eyes flashing with anger. You think you're so perfect, don't you? Always playing the victim. But you're not innocent in all this. You pushed Nathan away, and I was there for him. I shook my head in disbelief. You call sleeping with my husband being there for him? You're delusional, Rachel. The conversation escalated, each word we exchanged sharper than the last. But as the argument wore on, I felt a strange sense of detachment. This was no longer about winning an argument or proving a point. This was about closure. Finally, I leaned back, my decision clear in my mind. You know what, Rachel? I'm done. I'm done letting you and Nathan dictate my life. I'm moving on, and I suggest you do the same. Rachel's face twisted into a sneer. Move on? After everything you've done? Yes, move on, I affirmed. I've been granted full custody of Ethan, and Nathan is providing alimony and child support. The divorce is final. It's over, Rachel. She was visibly shaken, her bravado crumbling. You think you've won, don't you? You think you can just walk away from this? I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Yes, I'm walking away. From you, from Nathan, from this entire mess. I'm starting fresh, for Ethan and for myself. Rachel watched me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. But I didn't linger on her expression. I walked out of the cafe, leaving her in the past behind. In the weeks that followed, I found a new sense of peace. I focused on rebuilding my life, on being there for Ethan, who had been my rock through this entire ordeal. We moved to a new neighborhood, a fresh start away from the judging eyes and whispered rumors. I landed a new job, found new friends, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. The scars of the past would always be there, but they no longer defined me. As I watched Ethan play in our new backyard, laughter filling the air, I realized that this was what mattered. This was my new beginning, my chance to write a new story, one where I was no longer a victim, but a survivor, a woman reborn from the ashes of her past. And as the sun set, casting a warm glow over our new home, I knew that, despite everything, I had emerged stronger, ready to face whatever life had in store for me.
I've decided to split the $5 million between my mom and me. This decision came right after my dad's funeral. Bob, who had looked through the inheritance papers without asking, said to me, "Elena, don't be greedy." At that moment, I thought to myself, finally, I can quit my job and be thankful for the old man. But then Bob called him a doddering old man. I couldn't help but blurt out, "Are you talking about my dad?" While ignoring my shock, Bob and my mother-in-law were already excitedly talking about buying a new car and going shopping. With everything going on, I couldn't hold back my emotions any longer. I was about to burst. On top of all the housework, asking for money, and then insulting my dad, I just couldn't live with Bob and my mother-in-law anymore. Holding back my anger, I forced a smile and said, "Sure, feel free to use the money as you and my mother-in-law see fit." I am Elena Anaya, a 40-year-old housewife. Working with my husband, my parents, both doctors, ran a well-known clinic in our hometown. As their only child, I was deeply loved. After finishing Commonwealth School, I got a job at a big pharmaceutical company. Though my parents wished I had become a doctor, they supported my choice. 12 years ago, my mother died in an accident, leaving me and my father heartbroken. During that tough time, Bob, who was then my boyfriend, supported me. We met through a friend and got engaged 4 years after my mom's death. Bob worked in the food and beverage sector and earned less than me, but I believed we could face any challenge and be happy together. My dad was very happy for us. When I told my dad about our engagement, he said, "I've heard how Bob has supported you, Elena. Thank you so much. Please continue to take care of her." Bob stood up straight and promised in front of my dad, "I will make her happy." Standing next to Bob, I felt truly happy. The next week, we went to Bob's family home to announce our marriage. His mother, who wore a lot of makeup and was divorced from Bob's father, looked at me critically. "Marriage, huh? You're Bob's choice. Isn't she a bit plain for you? And she's older, right? Wouldn't a younger and prettier girl be better for you? Bob quickly replied, Mom, you know in pharmaceuticals, right? Alina works there. Her father is a doctor and runs his own practice. I expected Bob to talk about my personality, but instead, he talked about my job and my dad's status. Hearing this, his mother's attitude changed. Oh, Bob, you should have mentioned these important things earlier. That changes everything. I happily approve of the marriage. Nice to meet you, Alina. Thank you. After getting approval from Bob's mother, Bob was very happy. However, I felt uneasy. Even though everything was going smoothly with our plans to get married, when we were about to register our marriage, my dad, who is a doctor and real estate investor, gave me an apartment in a luxury building in San Diego City as a wedding gift. I told Bob, Dad has given me this apartment as a wedding gift, but it's our new home. Let's live here happily and peacefully together. Bob smiled, and we started our married life. However, after getting married, I realized something unsettling. Bob, who had lived with his parents until then, was almost incapable of doing household chores. He couldn't cook, didn't know how to use the washing machine, and showed no interest in learning. He would leave his garbage scattered around, not bothering to clean up. While I wanted us to share household responsibilities, Bob's careless attitude increased my frustration. In the first year of our marriage, I managed all the household responsibilities, even though I had some complaints. Since we were still in the honeymoon phase, with the exhaustion from work and the struggle to keep up with chores, I reached my limit. In our second year, I decided it was time to have a serious talk with Bob about sharing household duties. I bravely shared my unhappiness with Bob, but to my disappointment, he responded without any appreciation or thought, saying, I'm tired from work too. You're much better at chores than I am, right? It's better if you do them since I'm not good at it. Just like that, Bob hardly helped with the chores, and I continued to handle most of our household duties. But that wasn't the only issue. After marrying Bob, I found out his mother also had some strange ideas. Bob wasn't really into celebrating occasions, so I decided to send a quality scarf and some carnations to his mother for Mother's Day. Even though I picked a nice scarf from a department store, his mother called me displeased. She criticized the scarf for not being from a famous brand and said it was ridiculous to send such an unknown item. I tried to explain its quality, but she wouldn't listen, insisting she wanted something from a very famous luxury brand. Shocked, I told Bob about this when he got home, but instead of understanding, he said, just do as she says. Bob didn't support me, and from then on, we started giving his mother cash as she demanded. Moreover, by our 7th year of marriage, she began visiting our home frequently, always finding reasons to ask for money. Bob would always smile and give money to his mother without any complaints. Even though I had a job, Bob's income was small, making our daily life just barely manageable. Out of desperation, I had to dip into our savings to cut living expenses. Despite my frustrations, I knew Bob cherished his mother, and she had supported me during tough times. She was the mother of someone important to me, and with that thought, I endured. Now in our 10 years of marriage, I continue to handle all the household chores and keep giving money to my mother-in-law. One day, during this routine, my father, whom I hadn't seen in a while, unexpectedly called me. The story he shared during our rare meeting was shockingly unexpected. He revealed that he was suffering from terminal cancer and that treatment was no longer possible. Overwhelmed with shock, tears spilled from my eyes. My father gently stroked my head, just as he did when I was a child, saying, Alina, this is fate. Let's accept it quietly. I asked my dad why he even had to go through this. My days became a constant balancing act of work, household duties, and now visits to my father's hospital. While my job was somewhat flexible, managing the house was tough. When I told Bob I would be taking care of my father, he didn't react or offer to help. "It's tough with your father's sudden illness. Please do your best," was all Bob said. He only visited my father in the hospital once. I was so busy taking care of my father that I didn't have time for Bob. If I had time to worry about Bob, I wanted to prioritize my father. One day, as my father lay in his hospital bed, he suddenly asked, "Elena, how is your marriage with Bob going?" Caught off guard, I thought about Bob's attitude at home and his mother's behavior. I couldn't answer properly. Seeing my hesitation, my father seemed to understand and told me, "Elena, you don't have to endure this. Think about your happiness. Don't worry, you won't have any hardships after I'm gone." I couldn't hold back my tears, and my father silently and firmly held my hand. 5 months later, the inevitable happened. My father passed away quietly, engulfed in immense sorrow. I started arranging the funeral. Bob showed no interest in my grief and didn't help with any of the preparations. Despite this, I was too busy with the funeral arrangements to pay much attention to Bob. Many friends and acquaintances attended my father's funeral, making it a heartfelt farewell. Even the indifferent Bob and his mother attended. The day after the funeral, I received a call from a lawyer about my father's inheritance. I arranged a meeting with the lawyer and listened to the explanation. The information was all new and quite surprising. After deducting taxes like inheritance tax, my father's estate amounted to over $5 million. He had not only earned income as a doctor, but also made real estate investments, leaving behind such a vast fortune, all of it to be inherited by me, his only daughter. Wrapped in surprise and gratitude, yet trembling at the thought of handling such a huge amount of money, I proceeded with the inheritance process. After returning home, I laid out the documents I got from the lawyer on my desk and started reading them. I was so tired that I ended up dozing off on the sofa for a bit. When I woke up, I heard Bob and his mother talking happily in the distance. Bob and Mom too. "When did you come?" I asked as I got up. Bob came over with a big smile and said, "Yes, Elena, well done," confused by his sudden excitement. I noticed the inheritance papers in Bob's hand. "Wait, don't just read those without asking." I was shocked and upset that Bob had looked through the documents without permission. I raised my voice at him, but my mother-in-law, not bothered at all, happily chimed in, "Wow, an inheritance of $5 million. Isn't that amazing? Now we can live comfortably for the rest of our lives." Confused, I couldn't understand why she would say that so suddenly. Then Bob turned serious and continued, "By the way, about this $5 million. I've decided it will be split between me and my mom." It was right after my father's funeral. Bob, having looked at the documents related to the inheritance I was supposed to receive without permission, said to me, "Elena, don't be too greedy. Oh, now I can finally quit my job." "I have to thank that doddering old man you are talking about, my dad," I accidentally said out loud. "Well, anyway, let's proceed with the inheritance process and get the money into our joint account as soon as possible," Bob said, ignoring my confusion at that moment. Bob and my mother-in-law were excitedly talking about buying a new car and shopping. I couldn't hold back my emotions any longer. I was on the verge of exploding, being burdened with household chores, asked for money, and to top it off they insulted my father while holding back my anger. I replied with a forced smile, "Sure, use the money, you and my mother-in-law." "As you wish." Hearing this, my mother-in-law, seemingly satisfied, cheerfully said, "That's the spirit. Elena is quick to agree now. Make sure you work hard and earn money. I don't want our savings to go down, so work hard," she said. I just nodded and pretended to listen to her selfish words. After that, Bob and my mother-in-law started spending money like crazy. Bob quit his job quickly, and my mother-in-law practically moved in with us, staying at our house all the time. They would leave in the morning and come back with expensive brand items. The five-star restaurant we went to today wasn't as great as I expected, yes. It was a bit disappointing for us, the sophisticated ones, they would say, acting like they were rich celebrities and dumping all the housework on me. As if I were a maid, Bob seemed to think my father's inheritance would be available right away. He carelessly withdrew money from our jointed account, and my savings of $300,000 dwindled rapidly. When I complained about their excessive spending, Bob just laughed it off, saying, "What are you talking about? Isn't $5 million coming soon? Then this kind of spending is no big deal." I warned him I had already stopped it, but Bob completely ignored me. Then a month later, Bob and my mother-in-law suddenly left for a trip to Bermuda. I wasn't invited and was left alone at home. After seeing them off, I decided to take action. About a week later, while I was relaxing at home, I heard a loud knock on the door, wondering what was happening. I glanced at the intercom monitor and saw Bob and my mother-in-law, both dressed in aloha shirts, standing at the front door. What do you want?" I asked calmly and coldly with anger. Bob yelled, "What are you even talking about? Why won't the door open?" Seeing Bob and my mother-in-law confused as to why the door wouldn't open, I confidently answered through the intercom, "Well, I changed the locks on the door, so of course it won't open." "What? Why?" Bob exclaimed. "Let's talk over this calmly at the nearby cafe." "Please go ahead. I'll join you shortly," I suggested. Bob and his mother, after shouting in front of the entrance, seemingly realized it was full, and soon headed to the cafe. Once I confirmed they had left, I felt a moment of relief. I went to the cafe and saw Bob and his mother already there waiting angrily. "Hey, what's this about? Did you change the locks and hand over the new keys right now?" Bob demanded. "There's no need for me to give you the new keys. You both need to leave that house," I calmly told Bob and his mother, facing a visibly angry Bob. I showed him a piece of paper. It was a divorce petition. I had already filed out divorce. "You're serious about divorcing me?" His mother was equally shocked and confused. "Alina, why has it come to this?" I spoke quietly to the two of them, who were panicking and flustered with the way you've been spending money every day. "Are you sure your finances are okay?" "What money? Of course it's fine," Bob snapped back, spitting as he spoke. "Your father's inheritance is coming right. There should still be over $100,000 in our jointed account. Look, I'll show you right now." Saying this, Bob took out his smartphone and opened the banking app to check the account. Suddenly, his expression changed. "What's this? Why is the money gone?" "It was there just the other day," Bob exclaimed. Hearing Bob's words, his mother also hurriedly looked at her phone, her face showing confusion. I revealed the truth to them as they were panicking, not understanding the situation. "Of course, it's gone. I'm divorcing you, so." I moved that $100,000 to my account as part of the property division. "What do you mean?" Bob's face turned to anger for a moment, but then he smirked as if remembering something. "Fine, I'll divorce to then transfer the inheritance you got from your dad right away. After all property acquired during the marriage is split half and half in a divorce, right?" "Well, you might be misunderstanding something," I replied. "Didn't you know the inheritance I received, even though it was during our marriage, doesn't count for property division?" There was a moment of silence between us. Then Bob and his mother's expressions changed drastically. Perhaps they truly believed they would receive part of my inheritance. I was utterly shocked and could only sigh in disbelief at the unfolding situation. "No, that can't be true," I muttered under my breath. But the truth of the matter was glaringly clear. Her face turned red with a mix of denial and anger. "Please check for yourself," I said with a mocking tone that I couldn't quite mask. Bob immediately started frantically searching on his smartphone, desperate to prove me wrong as he scrolled through the legal texts online, and his face fell. What's this? Why is the money gone? It was there just the other day," Bob exclaimed, hearing Bob's words. His mother also hurriedly looked at her phone, her face showing confusion. I revealed the truth to them as they were panicking, not understanding the situation. "Of course, it's gone. I'm divorcing you, so I moved that $100,000 to my account as part of the property division." "What do you mean?" Bob's face turned to anger for a moment. But then he smirked as if remembering something. "Fine, I'll divorce to then transfer. The inheritance you got from your dad right away, after all property acquired during the marriage, is split half and half in a divorce right." "Well, you might be misunderstanding something," I replied. "Didn't you know the inheritance I received, even though it was during our marriage, doesn't count for property division?" There was a moment of silence between us. Then Bob and his mother's expressions changed drastically. Perhaps they truly believed they would receive part of my inheritance. I was utterly shocked and could only sigh in disbelief at the unfolding situation. "No, that can't be true," I muttered under my breath. But the truth of the matter was glaringly clear. Her face turned red, with a mix of denial and anger. "Please check for yourself," I said with a mocking tone that I couldn't quite mask. Bob immediately started frantically searching on his smartphone, desperate to prove me wrong. As he scrolled through the legal texts online, his face fell. "It says here that property inherited by one spouse from a parent is considered separate property. Therefore, it's not subject to division and can't be split between the spouses." His voice was tinged with disbelief. "What? Seriously?" His mother too peered over his shoulder, her expression turning to one of shock as the reality of the legal standing dawned on them. Then Bob approached me, his demeanor shifting to one of desperation. "Elena, please don't divorce me. I have no savings and no job. How am I supposed to live if you divorce me?" His plea was laden with panic and fear. But I had seen too much and endured too much to be swayed by his sudden show of vulnerability. Facing Bob's pleading, I stood my ground, my voice firm and unwavering. "What are you talking about? Take responsibility for your actions. I will never forget how you and your mother treated me. I'm divorcing you, and I'll go to court if I have to." My declaration was clear, a line drawn firmly in the sand. Intimidated by my fierce demeanor, which they had never witnessed before, Bob and his mother recoiled. They shrunk back in fear, whimpering softly as they stood there, dejected and defeated. I knew I had finally taken a stand. The weight of my decision was heavy but necessary, as I sought to reclaim my dignity and future from the ruins of a marriage that had veered so far off the path I had once envisioned. After walking out of the cafe, the divorce proceedings between Bob and I proceeded without major obstacles. The $100,000 I had shifted from our joint account was acknowledged as part of the division of our marital assets. Over time, I managed to legally compel Bob and his mother to vacate my house. This was a relief, as Bob, having already squandered the money from our marital division, found himself in a precarious financial state. He was penniless and increasingly overwhelmed with a mountain of bills, stemming from lavish expenditures on their overseas trip and various other expenses charged to his credit cards. As Bob's financial troubles escalated, he sank deeper into debt. Both he and his mother were forced to take on additional loans just to keep up with their mounting bills. Eventually, they moved into a rundown apartment, a stark departure from their previous luxurious lifestyle. They now find themselves working exhaustively every day to manage their debts, a situation that has been a profound and shocking adjustment for both. Meanwhile, I took decisive steps to move forward with my life. I sold the condo that I once shared with Bob, a place full of mixed memories, and moved into the apartment that had belonged to my late father. This move was not just a change of scenery. It was a step towards reclaiming my independence and starting afresh on my own terms. In this new chapter of my life, I continued my work as before, maintaining the same job that had always given me a sense of stability and purpose. However, with the inheritance I received from my father, my financial situation became significantly more comfortable. This financial security has allowed me to live without the constant stress of monetary concerns that once plagued my marriage with Bob. Living in my father's apartment has brought a new sense of peace and continuity to my life. Every day, I wake up with a heart full of gratitude for the man who not only raised me with love, but also ensured that I would be secure after he was gone. This gratitude has inspired me to approach life with a renewed sense of purpose and determination. With the lessons learned from my troubled marriage, I am now more committed than ever to protecting my happiness and well-being. I've come to realize the importance of being surrounded by people who support and uplift me, rather than those who seek to take advantage. As I move forward, I am determined to cherish and make the most out of every moment, focusing on personal growth and happiness. As the days pass, I find myself more at ease, enjoying a life that is not just about survival, but about thriving. My days are spent peacefully indulging in small joys and planning for a future that I now look forward to with optimism and excitement. The stark contrast between my life now and the life I shared with Bob serves as a constant reminder of how far I've come and how much I've achieved on my own. My name is Evelyn. I'm 38 years old, and I was raised by a devoted single mother after my father died when I was in kindergarten. Despite our financial struggles, the three of us found joy and contentment in our small family unit. Growing up in these circumstances, I developed frugal habits that carried into adulthood. Even when I earned a decent salary, I married Albert, a wealthy man whom I met through mutual friends. He was kind and introduced me to a lifestyle I had never imagined, but our marriage soon revealed deep differences in our views on money and gender roles. Albert envisioned a traditional home where I would be the homemaker, but I was committed to maintaining my career and financial independence. Before we married, Albert had hinted at his desire for me to take on traditional domestic roles. Still, I made it clear I wanted to continue working, at least until we decided to start a family. I saw it as financially prudent, and eventually he agreed, albeit reluctantly. Once married, the reality of juggling work and household responsibilities became overwhelming. I was a full-time employee, yet my days were filled with endless chores, leaving us little time to nurture our relationship. Albert, on the other hand, settled comfortably into the role of a traditional husband, contributing nothing to the household chores. He would come home to enjoy dinner and relax while I managed everything else. This imbalance began to strain our marriage, making me wonder if this was all there was to our union. Despite my growing dissatisfaction, I hesitated to express my feelings, fearing Albert might pressure me to quit my job. I had hoped that having children might improve our relationship, but as our connection waned, I doubted the feasibility of expanding our family. Feeling a sense of urgency, I finally broached the subject with Albert, suggesting we consider starting a family soon. His response was dismissive. "Kids? You seem quite energetic for someone who's always tired from work." This interaction was a tipping point, and it wasn't long before my world was turned upside down. During a business trip, Albert unexpectedly announced his intention to divorce me. He had also secretly married his lover and shockingly accused me of marrying him only for his money. He demanded that I relinquish any claim to our shared properties. Facing my indifferent husband, who had shown me nothing but disdain since our marriage, led to his unraveling and a rapid descent to rock bottom. Our confrontation opened my eyes to the harsh realities of our relationship and the challenging road ahead amidst our household duties and work responsibilities. I approached Albert about wanting to start a family, although we hadn't been married for very long. Being over 32 made me acutely aware of the biological clock women face. I explained to Albert that it was becoming increasingly difficult for me to conceive as I got older, and time was not on our side. However, Albert's response was dismissive. "But if we have a child, you'll expect me to help out, right? You know I'm swamped with work and won't be able to contribute to child rearing." His outright refusal to participate in raising our future children, even before they were born, struck me as odd. I intended to handle it mostly on my own, but I hoped he would at least show some willingness to help, considering it would be his child too. His stark reply was, "Child rearing is your job. I'm working to support the family, so I definitely won't help with the kids. You'll just end up complaining that I don't help, making me the bad guy." He even accused me of being conditioned to think that having many kids was normal because of my humble upbringing. "We're not poor, we don't need kids," he concluded, shutting down the conversation and retreating to his room. Left alone in the living room, I was overwhelmed with tears. My desire to have children was not only rejected, but my background was mocked. After this confrontation, our relationship quickly deteriorated. We barely spoke, and the dream of expanding our family seemed even more unattainable. As I continued to manage both my career and our home, working on significant projects at the office, I felt my connection with Albert growing even more distant. Then one day, as I was about to leave for a business trip, he unexpectedly wished me well and hinted at a big surprise awaiting me upon my return. His uncharacteristic kindness momentarily revived a sliver of hope in me. However, that hope was crushed when I returned. The first shock was that I couldn't open the front door. Albert had changed the locks. The second was even more devastating. He announced our divorce, claiming he had forged my signature on the papers with a friend as a witness. Inside, he handed me a document to sign which waived my rights to any property division. I protested the false accusations and insisted on a mutual renunciation of property rights, intending to document it publicly. Albert stubbornly revised the document on his computer, initiating a tense exchange. As I left our home, he continued to belittle my financial status and even threatened to discard my belongings. Several days later, Albert's urgent and flustered voice came through the phone. "What have you done?" he asked frantically. "I haven't done anything, Albert. Why are you so upset?" I responded, puzzled by his alarm. "They just kicked me out of the apartment," he explained, his voice tense. "You were still there, you know that's not allowed anymore. It's a new month, and technically, you're trespassing," I pointed out calmly. "But it's my place, don't you remember? It was a company apartment I rented. I'm the leaseholder, so obviously you can't stay there now," he argued. "That's ridiculous, Albert. How could you think it's all right to force me out without proper notice? I can't believe you didn't understand that as the leaseholder, you don't have absolute control," I said, trying to keep my composure. "I thought I made it clear you can't just change the locks on a rental property. It's not solely your house to alter at your whim," I continued, attempting to reason with him. "You should have listened. It was my lease agreement. But regardless of that, the apartment manager is the actual owner. You can't alter the locks without their consent." He shot back, still misunderstanding his rights. "Here's what you missed. I had already terminated the lease while you were busy changing the locks. I was permitted to stay there until the end of this month. I planned to return, but now you've illegally modified someone else's property, which might be seen as criminal damage," I informed him, hoping he'd grasp the severity of his actions. "Wait, why terminate it so soon? Criminal damage? Is that why there are police at my door?" Albert's voice cracked slightly. The police might be there, but it likely isn't for trespassing or criminal damage. You should speak with them just so you know. I reported to you independently filing the divorce papers. It appears you've committed forgery and used a private document fraudulently. Remember, divorce papers require mutual consent and authentic signatures. I explained sternly as he absorbed this information. The divorce papers you filed are void, and your supposed marriage to Judy can't legally proceed. How did I find out about Judy? Did you assume I was in the dark? I hired a detective agency to investigate your relationship with Judy thoroughly. Despite my hectic schedule at work and coordinating with the detectives, I discovered your elaborate wedding ceremony while I was supposedly on a business trip. I took leave from work, despite being swamped, to focus on gathering some crucial evidence and preparing documents. I had discovered that Albert was bringing Judy to our home, something I wouldn't have been able to uncover while juggling my regular work commitments. After confronting Albert with all the evidence I had collected, he was utterly speechless and sounded quite dejected over the phone. Then, in a desperate plea, he said, "Please don't tell Judy that I'm divorced." Why would I mention that? There's no such fact to disclose, I replied coolly. Really? Thank you, he responded, a hint of relief in his voice. Are you confused? When did you think you became divorced? Those divorce papers you filed are invalid. Remember, so legally, you're still my husband, not divorced, I clarified, ensuring he understood the gravity of the situation. What? So since you committed adultery while still legally my husband, Judy is now liable to pay compensation. I sent a demand for reparation to her house yesterday by express delivery. She didn't know you were married, right? At this point, I can't retract the claim, I explained, my voice firm. Albert was silent, likely processing the implications. Judy hasn't contacted me yet, so maybe she hasn't received the letter. It should arrive soon. Should you be on the phone with me when you have to deal with the police as well? You're busy, I added, a touch of sarcasm in my tone. I'll ignore the police. I won't be arrested. I'm going to Judy's house now to get the letter back before she or her family sees it. He blurted out, then hung up. I assumed he rushed straight to Judy's house to intercept the postman. I knew the endeavor would be futile, since the letter was sent as registered mail, addressed solely to Judy. Even if Albert waited for the postman, he wouldn't be able to receive it. A few hours later, a dejected Albert called me again. He recounted an awkward encounter. I was there when the postman arrived. Finally, I'll take that envelope, I told him. And who are you? You don't live here, right? The postman challenged. I'm practically a resident here since I'm married. I have the right to receive the mail, Albert argued, desperation in his voice. I see, but I can't give you this envelope. It's registered mail for Judy only. Give it to me, Albert demanded. Not if you're so eager. Ask Judy for permission, the postman replied, unmoved. Just then, Judy appeared, puzzled by the commotion. What's going on here? Oh, Albert, what's all this noise about? This is registered mail for you, Judy. This man insisted on taking it. Sorry for the disturbance, the postman explained, handing her the envelope. This unexpected revelation likely caused quite a stir, and I could only imagine the conversation that followed between Judy and Albert. On my way out, Judy confronted Albert, holding the envelope in confusion. What's this, Albert? A demand for reparation? You were married. What's going on here? Albert, visibly flustered, tried to cover up. Sorry, it's just she's an ex-wife from a long time ago. I was embarrassed to admit I'm divorced. I'm sorry for keeping it a secret, but it's odd, isn't it? We haven't been dating long, and a demand for reparation. If you were divorced before we started seeing each other, there shouldn't be any problem, right? Judy pressed on. Well, my ex-wife is, let's say, a bit unpredictable. Maybe she's demanding reparation out of spite because I got remarried, Albert replied, hoping to dismiss the situation. However, his excuse quickly fell apart. The envelope contained a letter I had written, along with my contact details. Judy, seeking clarity, called me directly in our conversation. I laid everything out. The affair, the invalid divorce, and that they had even held a wedding ceremony while he was still legally married to me. Although they celebrated their union, the marriage registration hadn't been submitted yet. Albert had planned to submit it on April Fool's Day, so it was still pending. He likely delayed the process due to uncertainty about whether the divorce had been finalized. After being confronted with the truth, Albert hastily left Judy's house and without any shame contacted me again. We agreed to meet at a nearby cafe to discuss further. As soon as I arrived, Albert pleaded, "Evelyn, please withdraw the reparation claim. Let's pretend we've been separated for a long time and are officially divorced now. I can apologize to Judy, claim I was secretly divorced, and maybe smooth things over. You think I'm desperate to stay married to you? I was planning to file for divorce anyway, but since you cheated, you'll pay reparation," he countered, firm in his decision. "Just trying to extort money from me, huh? Typical of someone with a poor spirit," Albert snapped, reverting to insults. "Depending on my response, everything can change. There's still an option where we don't divorce. If I say no, you can't reject it, meaning you can't marry Judy, and your marital status will be exposed," I explained, laying out the consequences. "Fine, I'll pay the reparation. Just divorce me now." "Sign here," he said, resigning to the situation. "And about property division, how much more do you want to take from me? The preparation should be enough. Remember we agreed to waive property division, right? So let's make it official," he added, trying to limit his losses. "All right, you're not as unreasonable as I thought." "Thank you," he conceded. We then went to a public notary, where we made a public document for reparation and property division, formally ending our ties and finalizing the necessary legalities. After finalizing everything at the public notary, we headed to City Hall to submit the divorce papers, officially ending our marriage. As we walked out relieved, I exchanged some last words with Albert. "I'm glad we don't have to deal with dividing property," I commented, trying to keep the conversation light. "What are you saying? I'm the one who benefits from that. By the way, do you even have assets after paying me reparation? Judy will also claim damages, charging you for the wedding expenses," Albert retorted, his tone dismissive. "That's impossible. I'm marrying Judy. She can't claim that we're divorced now, so there should be no problem," he continued, clearly still entangled in his narrative. "Albert, you committed marriage fraud. You had a wedding while still legally married to me. Do you think Judy still believes your story?" I asked incredulously at his denial. "Marriage fraud? That's ridiculous. Judy will believe me," he insisted, though doubt seemed to creep into his voice. "Believe that if you want, but I heard from Judy directly. Also, weren't the guests at your wedding paid actors? You still owe them, you know," I added, revealing more of his deception. "You know about that. I haven't paid them yet. What does it matter to you? You could have just taken property division and been better off," he snapped, frustrated. "That's what I wanted to tell you. Even if we had divided property, you would have benefited more," I explained calmly, ready to correct his misunderstanding. "What are you talking about? Poor woman, your family is poor, and you only make $210,000 a year, right? Even if you got a raise, it would be barely $225,000. You don't have any property, Albert scoffed, continuing to underestimate me. You keep calling me poor, so I thought you might be mistaken. Yes, my salary was indeed $130,000, but you know I work for a foreign company, right? It's not $130,000 per year, but per month, $210,000 per month, making my annual income $252 million. I corrected him, revealing the true extent of my financial success. You're still bad with numbers. How do you manage to keep a job? It's $200,000 a year, Albert mumbled, confused. $200,000? That can't be true. Of course, I haven't had the chance to spend such an amount, so I've been saving it for the future. The savings from before our marriage aren't part of the property division, but there's still a considerable amount. Since our marriage, I could have received half of that in the property division. You were my husband, after all, I pointed out, dismantling his assumptions. I'll get the divorce papers corrected. Are you okay? After all the contempt, do you think I'd gladly undo the divorce? If you had that much money, you don't need to claim reparation, right? He asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and resignation. After finalizing the divorce and dealing with the fallout, Albert looked bewildered and a little desperate. It's just a small amount for you. He tried to downplay the reparation for the mental anguish he had caused me. He who laughs at 1 cent will weep for 1 cent. I responded firmly. This reparation is for the emotional distress you caused me. Honestly, I would like to claim more. And since it's official now, make sure you pay it, even if it's in installments. I'll be left with nothing. And don't think about going back to that apartment. Your belongings have already been moved to your parents' house by now. You thought I had few belongings, but that was because I had already moved most of them. Were you really that indifferent to notice? I continued, pointing out his oversight. I can have so little, so now I have to go back to my parents' house. They don't know anything yet. Do they? Let me explain. Don't say anything. I've already told them everything. It's only right to explain why we're divorcing. Oh, and your father said, "Don't ever step over our threshold again," I said, cutting him off. Overwhelmed, he slumped down, and I left the cafe. Later, I heard he caused a scene at the police station. Ignoring my advice, he returned to the apartment, sitting aimlessly in the space until the manager called the police, and he was taken away. It wasn't clear if it was for obstructing public duties, trespassing, or for the falsified divorce papers. Eventually, his parents took responsibility for him. After speaking with me and learning about Judy, they decided that apologizing and paying damages to Judy's family was the priority. They went to Judy's house, knelt in front of her family, and settled everything without pressing charges for marriage fraud, even covering the wedding expenses. I had expected them to sue, so it was disappointing when they didn't. Therefore, I decided to pursue legal action against him for forging the divorce papers. Albert offered a settlement, but I didn't withdraw the lawsuit. I didn't want him to think that everything could be resolved with money. I wanted him to be convicted and truly understand the gravity of his actions, even if it cost time and money. I handed everything over to my lawyer, so it wasn't too burdensome for me. Despite it taking time, Albert was exposed for his actions and the marriage fraud. His company couldn't keep him on after he was detained by the police and subsequently absent without leave. He was eventually fired. He ended up living at his parents' home, working all day at a relative's construction company. His father took all his earnings, leaving him without any income. Albert's parents turned out to be more stringent than I anticipated. They compensated me for the emotional damage and paid Judy for her losses. Determined to have Albert work exhaustively until he had repaid everything, He ended up living in a basic shed-like structure without electricity, subsisting on just $16 a day for food, an amount deducted directly from his meager earnings. They even planned to ask him to leave once he settled his debts, a tough turn of events after his years of apparent ease. In the meantime, after the divorce was finalized, I was offered a position at our company's head office overseas. Accepting the offer, I moved abroad, a decision that eased my worries about Albert possibly seeking help from me or harboring resentment abroad. I assumed work would dominate my life for a while. However, life took a pleasant turn. I soon entered into a new relationship. I am now dating a foreign executive at our head office. Things progressed well, and I'm currently pregnant with plans to get married soon. I have been open with him about my past and my tumultuous relationship with my ex-husband, and he has been nothing but supportive and understanding. We've discussed our plans. I'll take maternity leave and later return to work, with him taking paternity leave and committing to co-parenting. This cultural perspective on sharing parenting responsibilities was refreshing and showed me a different way of life. Having endured so much turmoil with my ex-husband, I finally feel like I am on the path to true happiness and confidence, building the happy family I always dreamed of. My experience has taught me that while divorce is not always the desired outcome, enduring silence is never a virtue. It's crucial to realize that honest discussions can lead to meaningful resolutions, and sometimes divorce is a necessary step toward a better life. My name is Margaret, and I am a 41-year-old janitor. I've been working for a housekeeping company that cleans corporate offices since I was 22. I am a single woman about to celebrate 21 years of service. I took this job because I needed to look after my mom, who was very sick. We were a small family, just my mom, my brother, and me. My mom was raising us on her own. When she got seriously ill, I had to leave vocational school to take her to doctor appointments and help her out. I chose this job because it gave me the flexibility to take care of my mom. Now I'm really happy I ended up here. My boss and coworkers are supportive and always treat me kindly, calling me Margaret, sweetie. I also have a few people working under me, and they are wonderful too. I used to think there couldn't be a better place to work. My mother died when I was 23 and my brother was 18. Right as fall turned to winter. Losing her hit me hard, and I started taking more time off work. It was just as our company was getting ready for the busiest time of year with our year-end deep cleaning. Despite the bad timing, my colleagues told me, "It's okay, we'll wait for you to feel better." I was grateful for their kindness, but all I wanted was to be alone. I felt like following my mom, but I had a younger brother who needed me. He had lost his mom before even becoming an adult, and out of care for him, I forced myself to keep going. At that time, he was still in college. I looked after my brother, paid for his school textbooks, and drove him home when his classes ended late. When he got a job, I bought him a suit as a celebration gift, even though I didn't earn much. I worked hard and thought of myself as standing in for our mom. After our mom died, my brother started asking me, "Why don't you quit being a janitor and get a better job?" I think he was embarrassed by my low income and our modest social status. At that time, I wasn't mentally ready to change jobs, so hearing this from him was really tough. My coworkers were the ones who supported me kindly during this time. Later, my brother worked hard and got a job at a big corporation, a well-known company you often see in TV ads and online. His starting salary was almost double mine. He was as happy as a kid, getting lots of money for New Year's. "Look at this, sis, I surpassed you in just 2 months. Check out this slip, isn't it amazing?" He'd say, full of joy and bragging to others. "Sis, quit your janitor job and get a good one like mine." He'd tell me. "Hey, watch how you talk." "I love my current job," I'd reply. "Quit making excuses. Our salaries are no match," he'd argue. I wished he had chosen his words more carefully. Although I was glad his efforts had paid off, sitting in front of our mother's portrait, I reported to her, "Your son is all grown up now." But my younger brother, proud of his job and his company, was heading down a troubling path. He was good at his work and always talked about the praise he got from his boss. Despite being new to the company, he was chosen for a big project. As his sister, I was proud of him. However, I noticed him making condescending comments about his colleagues, and this only got worse over time. I was doing well at getting noticed. My brother complained about his coworkers. He thought they were slow and feared they might hurt his reputation. He said this openly, as if he looked down on everyone, not just those at his job. I knew his attitude could really harm him eventually. I tried to warn him. "I think all the new hires are at the same level, you know." "You're all just starting," I told him. But my brother snapped back, "Wow, sis, you're pretty talkative for a janitor with a low-level education." And he sneered at me. Frustrated, I answered, "Well, I've been working longer than you, so I know there isn't that much difference in people's abilities." He retorted, "Really? Do you have any college graduates at your cleaning company? Before you lecture me, why don't you tell them they've wasted their lives?" After belittling me, he went out for drinks. I thought the real world would teach him a lesson soon. Despite my concerns, his arrogance only grew worse. It started with him feeling superior because his salary was higher than mine. Then he began to see himself as more gifted than others, which changed how he acted. He didn't hold back his critical comments about me. At first, I thought he was just excited about his job, so I let it slide. But when gentle warnings didn't work, I seriously scolded him. Yet nothing changed. I started to doubt myself as a sister, wondering if I hadn't handled things well with him. Years passed, and I kept working as a janitor. My brother did well and climbed the corporate ladder, but his dismissive attitude toward others only got worse. Then he moved in with his girlfriend, and they got married. His wife also seemed very arrogant, which stressed me out. She was much younger than him, and it felt like she was from a different generation. The first time I met her, when my brother introduced us, she asked, "So you really are a janitor?" I replied, "Yes, I find it a fulfilling and enjoyable job." She said, "Really? Isn't it dirty?" I couldn't believe it when she said, "It must smell bad." My brother joined in and said, "Right, it's unimaginable, isn't it? It's unsanitary, and she's not attractive. She doesn't have any money either, but what can I do? I'm related to her. Sorry about that." I was shocked to hear this and don't remember much of what happened afterward. After she left, I yelled at my brother, "You are out of line." "What do you mean I am related to her, so it can't be helped? And what's up with her too? Don't you dare judge people by their jobs or income." My brother, surprised by my sudden outburst, stammered but managed to snap back, "Shut up. You're a vocational school dropout, and I'm a college graduate. So is she. We can't help but look down on you. You earn less and have a low-level job, so you're the one leading a loser's life." With that, he stormed out of the house. I cried out of sadness and frustration. I had dropped out of vocational school because of our mother's illness, and my brother knew that. His words hurt me deeply. Yes, my income is modest, but I still managed to pay for his education. I did my best to take over our late mother's role. I must have made a mistake in how I dealt with him. While crying, I looked at myself in the mirror. It bothered me that he called me ugly. I have a face similar to my brother's. I'm neither beautiful nor cute, but I don't think I'm ugly. Maybe I could take better care of myself. I wondered if I paid more attention to my looks and changed myself, would he see me differently? But even if I dressed up, it's unlikely my brother's personality would change. Marrying a woman with similar attitudes probably only made his narcissism worse. While talking to my coworkers about this, I started to think that my relationship with my brother might be beyond repair. One day, I received a postcard from my brother and his wife saying they had moved. From the address, it looked like a standalone house. What's this all about? They're so reserved. If they had told me, I would have thrown a celebration and even helped them move. I had something I wanted to discuss with them too, so I decided to call them after a long time. "Hello, I've got your postcard," I said. I could hear my brother's cheerful voice on the phone. "It's amazing, right? A single-family house at this young age. Because I'm a fast tracker, it would be impossible if it weren't me, right?" "Yeah, amazing indeed," I replied. He was bragging as usual, but I found it nostalgic and let him talk as much as he wanted. Then I brought up my matter. "I have something to talk to you about too. Just the other day, my company got contracted to clean your office building. We might bump into each other occasionally." "Good for you. You wouldn't get to step foot in such a big building otherwise, right?" He could have just ended there, but he added, "There's one more thing. I got a boyfriend." "What? Seriously?" My brother sounded genuinely surprised. "Yes, he's older and a wonderful man. After what you said, I started taking better care of my skin and such." "He fell for me at first sight," I said jokingly. "Well then, that's thanks to me, huh?" Somehow, he managed to take credit for this as well. "Well, I wouldn't say you haven't played a part in it. I wanted to introduce my boyfriend to you. He's been eager to meet you too. So would it be okay if we visited your place soon? We could also bring a housewarming gift," I mentioned casually. "You're coming over." His previously cheerful tone suddenly darkened. I wondered what was going on. "You do understand what your job is, don't you?" "Huh, job? You mean my cleaning job?" "Listen, I've got a new house, which means it's clean, right? I don't want a filthy person like a janitor coming into my house." "Excuse me?" Was he saying that because janitors are considered dirty, he doesn't want one in his brand new house? I was confused and my mind went blank. Considering the dirty work you do, shouldn't you know how to refrain from visiting people's places? I'm sure your coworkers feel the same. You're out of line. That's rude. Apologize. I said, my blood starting to boil in anger. I could feel my fury ready to explode. Was it common courtesy to stay away because my job is dirty? Rude. Apologize. What the hell? I couldn't contain myself and yelled out loud, "You've got some nerve to disrespect people like that. This is unacceptable." I could have handled it if it were just about me, but he was mocking my colleagues too. I couldn't let this slide. I could tell my harsh words shocked my brother over the phone. He's usually quick to criticize others, but when someone fights back, he stumbles over his words. Do you really think a person's worth is based on their job? That's just silly. Apologize to me right now. I demanded. What? Why are you freaking out all of a sudden? He replied. I've had enough of you. How did you become so mean? Mom would be heartbroken. The real mean person is you. Your boyfriend must be worthless if he can't get a better job. If he had any sense, he wouldn't even talk to a cleaning lady. If you weren't my sister, I would never deal with someone dirty like you. If you weren't my brother, I would have left you behind a long time ago. I shot back. I was about to say that I'm cutting ties with you. Never contact me again. Oh, okay, got it. Goodbye then. We both said things to hurt each other. It was a petty argument, and neither of us was in the mood for a mature conversation. He tried to say something more, but I hung up on him. I was ready to cut ties with my brother. He's the only sibling I have. But I couldn't stand him anymore because he thinks that as a janitor, I don't deserve basic respect, even though we're siblings. If our values are this different, it's better for us to stay apart. From now on, I'll be fine. My brother is already an adult. This is our goodbye. I had come to terms with my feelings. Several months passed since I decided to sever ties with my brother. By some twist of fate, I was assigned to clean the office building where he worked. I think my boss was trying to be thoughtful, but I really didn't want to be there. However, my principle is to do my best at any job I'm given. Suppressing my feelings, I headed to my brother's company. The building was huge, spacious. With such a large space, I should be able to avoid running into my brother. Even if we did meet, he probably wouldn't recognize me. Feeling slightly relieved at that thought, I focused on cleaning, pushing my cart filled with cleaning supplies. It was that afternoon while I was mopping the floor, I noticed a group of about 5 men standing by the vending machine, sipping canned coffee and talking. One of them was saying, "I really am sorry for the inconvenience caused." Enough is enough. How many years have you been with us? Consult and report before things get to a point where the whole team has to clean up your mess, another man scolded. Yes, sir. It's happened 3 times just this quarter. I'm sorry, sir, the man replied. It seemed like the guy who was apologizing had made some mistakes, and they all had to work together to fix them. Good job, guys, I thought to myself as I continued mopping, making sure not to look in their direction. While your peers have already become team leaders, some even managers, you need to step up your game. Another scolding came. I'm sorry, the man replied. Those were some harsh words. I wish they'd let him off the hook soon, I thought. I wanted to mop from there all the way down the hallway on the other side, but they were in the way. After scolding the man once again, they all returned to the office. As the group passed by me, I noticed a familiar face, my brother. The one who had messed up and was being scolded was my brother. I couldn't believe it. My brother also saw me, froze for a minute, then went completely pale. But without saying a word to me, he quickly followed his team and left. During the rest of my shift, my mind kept drifting back to my brother. He was supposed to be the fastest rising among his colleagues, but the brother I saw earlier looked nothing but a burden to the company, a straggler. He seemed like an employee who constantly made mistakes at work and was always apologizing. This intuition came from watching various human interactions in the corporate structure over the years. As a janitor, his claim of being a competent individual was just his vanity. He must have been doing well at the beginning, at least. As I suspected, he might have become complacent and been overtaken by his colleagues, tripped up when he least expected it. I think it's bound to happen because of his personality. He looks down on others so easily. But I don't need to worry about him anymore. My brother and I are strangers now. We've cut ties. A few days after realizing the truth, I saw my brother again. I was cleaning the main lobby when he came down the elevator with someone. Darn, I left the bag with the samples upstairs, he said. I'll go get it. You can wait here, sir. No need, I'll go. You're useless anyway. But when you get promoted, you take care of me, okay? My brother said. Not again, sir. I told you I'll go get it, the man who seemed to be his junior replied. He went back on the elevator to retrieve the forgotten item. It was ironic seeing how he treated me in the past, claiming to be confident from a distance. I watched my brother shrink into a corner of the lobby, feeling pity for him as I cleaned the leaves of the lobby's decorative plants. My senior colleague, who was cleaning with me, quietly came over. "Hey, isn't that your brother?" she asked. Yes. It seems like he messed up. Let's just leave him be, okay." My colleague, looking worriedly at my brother, went back to her cleaning duties. Bothered by our sympathetic looks, my brother sprang up and marched over to me. "Hey, janitor, what are you doing?" "I'm cleaning." "No, I mean, why are you here?" "I'm working," I replied. My brother got visibly angry and raised his voice. "Don't you dare tell my wife that I look pathetic at work. You got that." His frustrations seemed to be vented on me. The gazes of those around us focused on my loudly ranting brother. Out of concern for the onlookers, I whispered, "You're trying. Shut up, don't you?" A lowly educated person orders me around. "People are watching. People are watching," my brother exclaimed. "Oh dear brother, please, can you please be quiet?" I tried to calm him down by holding his hand, but he recoiled. You're filthy. Don't touch me." He aggressively wiped the area I had touched and continued his insults. "You're threatening me, aren't you? You want money, right? How much do you want me to cough up?" "Threaten for money? What are you talking about?" I asked, dumbfounded. "I told you not to tell my wife, did it, you idiot?" My brother snapped. Oh, that's what this is about, I realized. Constant mistakes at work or falling behind in your career. "Which one do you not want me to mention?" "Both, obviously," he replied, clearly scared I might reveal everything to his wife. "Wait, you're even lying to your own wife?" I asked. "Shut up. No garbage like you should speak," he retorted. Garbage? What on earth? He didn't care who was watching. He just kept insulting me. The stress from his job must be overwhelming, and he probably felt better by putting me down. "I'm not some punching bag for you to take your frustrations out on," I told him. Just then, a voice from behind intervened. "That's rude to the cleaning staff." "Shut up. Who are you?" My brother blurted out, finally noticing the tension around him. Unable to tolerate my brother's rudeness any longer, a well-dressed, gray-haired elderly man stepped forward. His high social status was evident. The man stood beside me and gently placed a hand on my back. "Dirty idiot." Such intolerable slurs. "Apologize to her right now," the man demanded. "Huh, but she's my sister. We're just having a family squabble," my brother stammered, trying to downplay it. "I thought you said you cut ties with me," I interjected. "Shut up," he snapped back, showing his jewel nature, humble towards the man but aggressive towards me. The gray-haired man then added, "If it's a family issue, it concerns me as well." "Pleased to meet you. I'm the gentleman dating your sister," he revealed. My brother was shocked. "I'm the executive vice president of the subsidiary that your company is seconding. I'm also a board member of your company. I'm sorry we didn't have a chance to introduce ourselves the other day," the man continued. What? My brother was panicking, completely out of his depth. Feeling a bit awkward, I gave my boyfriend a side glance. "You didn't really have to step in just now," I muttered. "If not now, then when?" He replied with a warm smile, mimicking a popular TV personality. Sis, is that really true?" My little brother asked, terrified. Indeed, when we were contracted to clean this building, I accompanied our CEO, I explained. He who was in charge of the contract was interested in me. "No, that's a lie." "It's the truth. During the contract signing, I instantly fell for her, who was explaining the details on behalf of a CEO who couldn't do it well. And I asked her out," my boyfriend said. A wave of gasps and murmurs echoed through the lobby. How embarrassing. I heard you said that no decent man would date a cleaning lady, and that he probably doesn't even have a stable job, I said. I didn't say that, my brother responded. But whether he said it or not, he needed to apologize for the insults he threw at me. My brother had no choice but to listen to the stern words from the man. Turning pale, he bowed his head towards me. "I'm sorry," he muttered, his voice weak and filled with despair, lacking any energy or emotion. Later, my brother was transferred to a remote branch of a subsidiary company. Let me make it clear. My boyfriend had nothing to do with my brother's transfer. My brother panicked when his coworkers heard his repeated insults towards me and feared his wife finding out about his problems at work. This led him to make several mistakes. It seems like he's no longer on the fast track to promotion. His wife came to me crying when she learned about his transfer. "You're dating an executive from my husband's company, aren't you? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Please bring my husband back to the head office," she begged. "Of course," I said, but her plea fell on deaf ears. Unable to afford their mortgage with his reduced salary after the transfer, it looks like they'll have to sell their newly built home. I have no interest in what happens to my brother and his wife after this. And me. I got married to my boyfriend, and we're living happily in our newly built home. I'm still working as a cleaner, but now less out in the field because I've become the president of the cleaning company I've always worked for. The president retired, and I was nominated as the successor. I had a lot of doubts about being president, but I decided to give it my all for the company I love. No matter what anyone says, I plan to continue doing the job I love for the company I love, with my head held high. "Go ahead and get welfare, you poor thing. Ha ha." After those words, the two of them left the house. I felt all the strength leave my body and slumped down on the spot. I couldn't help but remember what Greg had said earlier. While you are indeed independent, I've always felt like my pride as a man has been hurt. From now on, I will build a family with my sister-in-law, no, with Brandy. So please, let's get a divorce. I became indifferent to everything and signed the divorce papers to indicate my intention to divorce. Sometime later, I decided to demand property division from them, and we had a meeting with a lawyer present. Brazenly, an unrelated sister demanded a share of the assets. However, the lawyer burst into laughter and said, "Aren't you the one on welfare?" Caught off guard by the sudden turn of events, my sister made a baffled face and let out a ridiculous scream. Immediately after seeing the documents the lawyer had placed on the table, my sister turned pale. My name is Erin Anderson. My husband Greg and I have been married for 18 years. I am 45 years old, while Greg is 3 years younger at 42. We have one daughter, Jenny, who is currently 17 years old and in her second year of high school. She is facing an important period with her exams coming up next year. Greg and I met through work. I was working at a real estate company, and Greg was employed at a related company. We hit it off over something trivial and frequently went out in our private lives. Greg is very sensitive and often struggles to make decisions decisively. At the time, I found his indecisiveness endearing and was drawn to him. I wanted to take care of Greg and did so purely because I have a much younger brother. Initially, I saw Greg as a brother and took care of him, but gradually I was attracted to his more masculine sides. After a serious relationship, we got married. Greg, who was usually indecisive, took the initiative to confess and propose. In situations where decisions had to be made, he did so properly. That gap made me feel that I could marry him and be okay. We had Jenny without experiencing any serious arguments or crisis of divorce. I thought that once Jenny became an adult, We would start our second life as a couple. "Hey, Aaron, can I stay here for a bit?" That was until my sister Brandy showed up unannounced with a large suitcase. Besides my brother, I have another sibling, which is the sister standing before me. We get along well with my brother due to the age difference. However, my sister, who is close in age to me, and I have always had a poor relationship. I was always smaller and ended up wearing my sister's hand-me-downs. When our parents felt sorry and bought me a new toy, she would say, "Aw, lucky. Give me one too," and snatch the new doll I had received, replacing it with her old worn-out doll. Her tyranny didn't stop there. Taking things was still on the cuter side. When I entered elementary school, she took all my friends, and when I got my first boyfriend in high school, she seduced him away. I hated her so much that I went to a different university to avoid her, but she still interfered with my life, ruining what should have been a fun college life. I still dislike my sister to this day. If possible, I don't want anything to do with her. So I studied hard, obtained my real estate license, moved to New York, and lived a life without seeing my sister. For our wedding, Greg and I decided to have a photo wedding just for the two of us. Knowing my sister's personality, my parents kept my marriage a secret. Despite my hopes, my sister found out about my presence here. I was looking forward to having some time for myself and my husband once Jenny went to college. "Wow, Aaron, you live in a pretty nice house for yourself. Is it a single-family home? Did you buy it? Oh, there's a room available here. I'll be using this one, thanks." I was snapped back to reality by my sister's shrill voice. "Hey, this is really inconvenient. You can't just show up and expect to stay. My husband and daughter live here too, you know." My sister ignored my words and started looking around the house. Today was a holiday, but Jenny was out attending classes, and Greg had left early in the morning for work. "Could you please leave before the two of them come back?" I pleaded with her repeatedly, but my sister wouldn't listen. Finally, in the evening, both of them came home. Who might this be?" Greg, who looked puzzled, asked. My sister greeted him with a charm that belied her 46 years. "Nice to meet you. I'm Aaron's sister, Brandy. When did you two get married? I had no idea, no greetings or anything. I was visiting our parents' house and found your photo wedding pictures in Mom's room by chance. It's so cold of you, keeping it from your own sister." Greg knew I had a sister, so he looked slightly troubled, probably thinking she was exactly as I had described. But I didn't miss it. Greg was slightly smitten by my beautiful sister. Jenny, returning home to a confused scene, must have been surprised. Suddenly, an aunt they had never met before had invaded our home. However, my sister pushed forward with the idea of moving in. Actually, I got fired, and it's been tough managing rent and living expenses, so I was wondering if I could stay here for a bit. "Well, if it's just for a little while, I guess it's okay." "What?" "Now is not the time. Jenny has her exams next year, a critical time." I tried to say that, but the two of them didn't listen to me and got carried away. Actually, Erin told me about her sister. That's okay. Erin probably avoided talking about me, so you went along with it, right? Sorry about my sister. This marked the beginning of a tumultuous daily life. My sister demanded money without doing any chores, and even started taking cash from my wallet. This all happened within just 1 week of her moving in. I had repeatedly warned her about this behavior, but she didn't listen. Hey, if you need money, at least tell me what you're buying or why you need it. Don't just take it from my wallet without asking. What? Why do I need to report to you what I'm buying? Because it's my money. If she was fired, I wish she would job hunt and leave our house quickly. However, it didn't seem like she was looking for a job, And recently, Greg and Brandy's schedules have been suspiciously overlapping. Greg claimed he was working overtime, but his salary never reflected any overtime pay. I confronted him about it. Your salary doesn't include overtime, does it? If you can't ask for overtime pay, should I ask on your behalf? What, are you doubting me? I'm properly paid for my overtime separate from my salary, so there's no issue. Greg, usually mild-mannered, raised his voice for the first time. This was shocking enough for me, as Greg wasn't someone who resorted to emotional arguments or sudden outbursts. From this point, I started to feel a crisis looming over our current lifestyle. My sister continued to laze around the house, costing more money than even Jenny consumed, leaving me with nothing but sighs. I discussed this matter with our parents. They apologized for their lack of oversight, which led to my sister finding out about my marriage and our home, but the fault wasn't with my parents. Despite the distance from my dear parents, I lived quietly with my husband and daughter, yet my sister became obsessed enough to track down our home. She must have been preparing to find out where we lived the moment she discovered the photo wedding pictures Greg and I took. I'm sure she's thinking of taking my things and making me miserable again. I've even begun to doubt whether her claim of being fired is true. Perhaps she quit her job on purpose to freeload at our place and ruin my life. This began to seem like a possibility. If that's the case, I need to kick my sister out of the house as soon as possible. Hey, you said you got fired, but if you were enrolled in employment insurance, wouldn't you be eligible for unemployment benefits? I've always been working part-time, so I wasn't in anything like that. That's why I'm in trouble. I could have gone back to our parents' house, but I can't just make our elderly parents take care of me, right? So as the independent sister, you should take responsibility. That's common sense. I was speechless at her nonsensical statement. After dropping out of college, Brandy had always worked part-time and never as a full-time employee. Learning this fact later made me realize why her job hunting wasn't going well. Then 3 months after Brandy began freeloading, I caught Greg and her in an affair. I had been suspicious, but to actually see them cheating. A meeting was canceled, and while killing time in a cafe, I saw Greg and Brandy walking together, hand in hand, chatting happily. It's inconceivable for a brother-in-law and sister-in-law to hold hands like that. At that moment, I was certain they were having an affair. After a while, when I had made up my mind, I confronted them at home. So the overtime was a lie, huh? And you, pretending to job hunt while actually hanging out with Greg. The worst. Even at this age, you can't be satisfied without taking something from me, can you? That's why I kept my marriage a secret from you. I exploded with emotion. They casually admitted to the affair, then began to say even more infuriating things. If I had known such a beautiful woman was your sister, I wouldn't have avoided her just because you told me to. Aaron, you're indeed independent, but I've always felt my pride as a man was being hurt. From now on, I want to build a family with my sister-in-law. No, with Brandy. So let's get a divorce. He then pushed a divorce paper towards me, already filled out in Greg's section. Fine, there's no way we can rebuild this. Brandy, Greg, from now on, I won't be responsible for your financial support, so just know that. Brandy then laughed out loud and said, "Go ahead and get welfare. You poor thing." What? As I wondered what she meant, Greg, half smiling, added something even more appalling. Oh, that's right. Since custody usually favors the mother, it's better for our daughter to be with you, Aaron. Do whatever you want from now on. With those words, they left the house. A few minutes later, Jenny came home and was puzzled by the quietness of the house. I honestly told her that we were getting a divorce. Initially shocked, Jenny seemed somewhat relieved as she accepted the situation. After a while, the divorce was finalized. I decided to discuss compensation with them in the presence of a lawyer I hired. Shamelessly, Brandy demanded a division of assets. However, the lawyer burst into laughter and said, "Aren't you the one who should be on welfare?" Caught off guard by the sudden turn of events, Brandy made a baffled face and let out a ridiculous scream. Immediately after seeing the documents the lawyer placed on the table, Brandy turned pale. This couple doesn't have the kind of money that can be divided. Brandy looked shocked as she glanced back and forth between Greg and me. Of course, Greg was also surprised to hear that we hardly had any assets. Anticipating this, I had taken certain actions immediately after witnessing Greg and Brandy's affair. Therefore, the only cash between us was a mere $112,000. For a couple celebrating their 18th wedding anniversary, it's a hard-to-believe amount. "Hey, what's going on? You had a lot of savings, didn't you?" Greg, completely bewildered, asked this in a panic. Seeing him like that, I felt a surge of anger. "You really have no interest in Jenny, do you?" We talked about this. I said I've been saving up for her education, but now I'm thinking of transferring it to Jenny's account. You told me to do as I wish, so I transferred almost all of my savings to Jenny's account for her education. You should know this better than anyone. Jenny is managing her own money, and even after paying gift tax, it's no longer considered our savings. I said this with a composed face. Greg's complexion turned visibly worse as he remembered the conversation. "Then what's the breakdown of the $112,000? Greg asked. "About 80% of it is probably your secret savings," I replied. Saying this, Greg looked at me as if wondering how I knew about it. "You knew about it and transferred your savings to Jenny, anticipating the division of property. You agreed to it, remember? You even signed the consent form." At this, Greg became furious. I thought it was strange. "Why would you ask for my consent just for that?" Greg said, frantically scratching his head, clearly regretting his actions. But it was too late to take back his signature. The lawyer confirmed that since Greg had agreed to the gift to Jenny, it was no longer considered marital savings. I didn't want to give such money to these two. That's why I thought of making a living gift, I explained. Hearing this, Brandy was dumbfounded, but somehow managed to say to Greg, "Hey, you said we had plenty of savings. Weren't we supposed to live a luxurious life together? Dividing $112,000 won't amount to much. Why didn't you realize Aaron's intentions sooner?" Brandy reproached Greg, her face turning pale, but Greg avoided her gaze and kept silent. Greg had been earning little and had a considerable amount of student loans, so he hardly contributed to the living expenses after our marriage. However, this was agreed upon. When Greg mentioned it was difficult for him to contribute to living expenses, I said, "All right, I'll manage all the living expenses. So could you focus on saving money for our old age as much as possible?" Thus, I had been covering all living expenses for over a decade. Greg thought he had been able to save at least $1,000 or more, but when it was revealed it was less than $10,000, I was shocked. I had thought saving would be easy, since he didn't have to pay living expenses, but Greg had been secretly squandering money. I felt betrayed when I accidentally saw his bank book left on the desk and learned of the savings amount. However, now that we're divorced, such matters no longer concern me. Brandy, finally grasping the severity of the situation, trembled slightly, trying hard to think of what to do next, but apparently came up with nothing. Knowing that the cash available for division was only $122,000, and seeing Brandy's confusion, I decided to reveal another truth. I looked towards Greg and said, "I was debating whether to say this, but Greg, aren't you planning to quit your job?" At that moment, our eyes met squarely. Greg, visibly shaken, glanced left and right before exclaiming, "How do you know I'm planning to quit my job? I only talked about it with the boss." I thought so after seeing the payroll slip. My observation was based on the fact that no overtime pay was being paid. But actually, I found it strange looking at a certain section. This is about the use of paid leave. Greg, who used to work for a real estate company and now works for a construction company, has never taken more than the minimum required 5 days of paid leave. However, recent pay slips revealed that Greg had taken a bunch of paid leave all at once, which usually suggests resignation. At this time, I was already suspecting their affair, wondering if Greg decided to quit his job thinking he would get a large sum of money after divorcing me. To my surprise, this guess was right on the mark. I couldn't help but sigh at Greg's overly optimistic thinking. "Well, you are my husband, so you should at least know what job I do and how much wealth I've accumulated. To think you relied on that, cheated, and even chose to resign. You really haven't thought this through," I said. Greg's face turned red. The lawyer's remark to Brandy, asking if she was the one on welfare, meant that if the two unemployed individuals came together, they would end up on welfare unless they worked. Brandy, flustered by this realization, suddenly shouted, "Wait a minute. If you can prepare for Jenny's college expenses and cover living costs all by yourself, there must be something fishy. I get it, you're hiding assets, right? That's the only explanation. Come on, confess now." Hearing her words, Greg seemed to have an epiphany. "That's right, Brandy. Actually, Aaron owns a lot of real estate, so we have to divide those assets too." Close call, I almost got tricked. Real estate is a significant asset, and we need to split it fairly between us. You've been acting all high and mighty, but you're also using sneaky tactics. Watching the two of them laughing about this, I was just dumbfounded. The lawyer couldn't help but chuckle at their ignorance. The tension in the room heightened. The lawyer cleared his throat and began to speak plainly. "If we're going to talk about the division of property, you should study up a bit more, Greg. As the ex-husband, you should know that Aaron owns real estate through her company, generating profit. A corporation and an individual are separate entities. Aaron's company is her separate property, and it cannot be divided as marital property. The professionals have spoken, and there's no mistake." Realizing this, the two of them turned red and were speechless. The lawyer continued, "What can be considered for division are things like cars, houses, and cash savings. Moreover, Greg and Brandy have virtually admitted to their affair, allowing Aaron to demand compensation from you too. Let's say $10,000 from Greg and $3,000 from Brandy." As soon as they heard this, their faces contorted. "Isn't that too high?" It was just a few months' affair, they protested. "Yeah, isn't this normally not as much as $10,000? They seemed not to have expected such a turn of events and began making excuses. However, I immediately countered, "Who decided that? The market is just a reference. Greg, you took leave to secretly date my sister, and she didn't even bother to properly job hunt, instead choosing to live off my money." The lawyer objectively assessed the situation and decided on this amount. "What would you have preferred, a higher amount?" At that, they hastily shook their heads no. The discussion couldn't be concluded in just one day and was adjourned. But I felt a firm respect response. 2 weeks later, we convened again for discussions. Brandy, with a defiant attitude, said, "Give me the house and the regular car." "Is that what you call compensatory property division? Then give Greg's $122,000 to him, and I'll pay the remaining $1,000. Okay. Hearing such nonsensical demands, I was about to yell in anger, but managed to control myself with reason and slowly sorted out the situation. The house still had a mortgage and required maintenance regularly, so it would have some value if sold. The car was also relatively new, purchased just 5 years ago. Accepting my sister's proposal would mean a loss for me, which I absolutely did not want. Sister, did you even do the math? If you consider selling the house and car, you wouldn't say such things. Usually, it's not the cheating party, you guys, who should be making these demands. It's me, as I pondered how brazen they could be. Greg, sitting next to my sister, overlapped my words with his own, beginning to say something else. You own assets worth $170 million in the company, right? I don't care if you're some real estate mogul or whatever, but being so stingy with all that wealth is just insane. Caught off guard for a moment, I ended up laughing at their absurdity, given the situation. Seeing me suddenly burst into laughter made the two of them freeze. After a good laugh, I returned to a serious expression. So is that all you wanted to say? And why are you acting like you're the victims here? Stingy? I'd rather be stingy than give any money to a man who abandons his daughter for an affair, or to the worst kind of sister who steals her sibling's husband. I'd rather secure as much as possible for Jenny. They flinched at my words. I wanted to tell them to study more about legal terms if they wanted to use them. What were they even thinking, saying such things? I planned to dismantle their delusions bit by bit. Greg, this house is under my name, right? I know that, but we've lived together here, Greg interjected. So what? It's my separate property since I bought it with a mortgage before we got married. No matter how you twist it, it remains mine, I clarified. The car, bought new, is accident-free and of a model that sells well. If you want it, you'll have to pay me half its appraised value. That's how property division works. We own 2 cars. One is the new car currently being discussed, the other a used compact car. Probably wouldn't fetch much, but the lawyer said houses and cars are subject to property division. Brandy added. She said this without thinking it through, but that's not what it meant. Look, the lawyer was just mentioning the main things subject to property division, not that they'd necessarily be divided in our case. All we have to divide between us is the $112,000 from Greg's secret savings and my savings, plus the 2 cars. That's it, I explained. Naturally, Brandy was clueless, and Greg hadn't thought it through, landing them in trouble again. Greg pleaded with me after showing some semblance of thought. Can you just give us enough money to start our new life? Please. His apology seemed superficial. He just wanted to solve the immediate problem. I don't need such a shallow apology, I steeled my heart and responded. Given your attitude, it seems like you wouldn't want to pay for Jenny's child support either. There's not a single thing I'm willing to compromise on. Why should I have to worry about your living expenses? I firmly stated my position, and realizing they couldn't persuade me further, they reluctantly signed the necessary documents. Sometime after the divorce and property division were settled, Brandy called me repeatedly, complaining, why did Greg have so much debt? You were paying the living expenses, right? Then why would he need to borrow money? What's going on? She was frantic over the phone. I patiently explained the reality to her that should have been obvious when it came out that he only had less than $10,000 saved despite having years to save. Maybe he made some big purchases on credit or something like that, I suggested. As I asked this, Brandy eagerly shared her situation. Yes, he took loans of several thousands to buy nonsensical brand items. And it turns out his credit card was set to revolving payments, without him knowing, making a huge mess. So this guy is just a debt disaster. How could you push such a person onto me? Push onto you? You're the one who stole him, remember? I couldn't help but retort with a half-laugh, and Brandy fell silent. It seems Greg had been accumulating debts I wasn't even aware of. Now demand letters are arriving in droves. He must have been careless with his address change, or perhaps in the chaos of starting a new life, he forgot to hide them. Oh, and there's one more thing I haven't told you, Brandy, I continued. What now? Brandy was utterly terrified. But hearing about the debt made me recall something Greg had mentioned. He was working in construction now as a sole proprietor. While this meant his income and residence taxes were deducted, he was responsible for managing other necessary payments himself. Being self-employed, I handled my national pension and health insurance. And when Greg left his job in real estate, I made arrangements for Jenny to be covered by the national health insurance as well. I took care of my taxes and such, but it turned out Greg hadn't paid his national pension for a year since he switched jobs, I explained. I was covering the health insurance, so there was no issue there. Due to some mistake, a national pension demand notice was sent to our house. I contacted Greg and got his permission to open it. And it was indeed a demand notice he had been hiding all along, and I hadn't noticed. I pay my own national pension and assumed Greg was paying his. When I called Greg about opening the demand notice, he almost cried and begged for help. National pension costs that much. You're kidding, right? I can't pay this. We were a family, weren't we? Can't you do something, please? What? You have the nerve to say that. The very person who abandoned his wife and child is asking for help. My logic left Greg speechless again. Realizing there was no way out, Brandy seemed to lose all hope over the phone as well. So you'll have to figure it out yourselves. I ended the call eventually. Greg called, complaining about the high taxes on the car I had taken, and how expensive the vehicle inspection was. Maintaining a car costs this much. I thought taxes were just a few $10, but they're in the hundreds, and the vehicle inspection costs so much. Hog, it's tough, isn't it? Can't you take it back? No, after I curtly refused, Greg hung up deflated. He kept sending emails asking for help, but when I warned him that any more harassment would lead me to report him for stalking, he stopped. Brandy and Greg were in for a hell worse than hell itself. They ended up divorcing after only 3 months of marriage. Immediately following our divorce, their plan had been doomed from the start. When they realized the house under my name wasn't part of the assets to be divided, their marriage was never going to work. With tens of thousands in debt and compensation to pay, their divorce was more tumultuous than my own. With Greg, Brandy was always fixated on money. Sell the new car. It's a waste to keep something like that. Might as well cash it in, right? What? I don't care about that petty cash. Besides, I paid your compensation in full, so if we're splitting, you owe me that money. They couldn't finalize their divorce because of such petty arguments. Eventually, Greg chose to declare bankruptcy, unaffectedly by me since I had already collected the lump sum compensation. Greg ended up jobless and penniless, leading him to homelessness. He couldn't retract his statement about quitting his job and left the company. Pride prevented him from applying for welfare, and now he's likely living a miserable life, begging on the streets. Brandy faced divine retribution after stealing her sister's husband and divorcing in just 3 months. Her social relationships crumbled, disowned by family and relatives. She struggled with job hunting due to her attitude. Even when she managed to get part-time jobs, her domineering nature and refusal to accept fault led to immediate dismissals. The lawyer's warning about welfare became reality. Brandy, clinging to her possessions, was ineligible for welfare, evicted from her apartment, and became homeless like Greg. They trampled on the feelings of both me and Jenny with their selfish actions, so this punishment was only natural. Now it's just the two of us living together, but our days haven't changed much. Jenny said she felt relieved after Greg, who never did anything for her yet, always complained about studying and going to a good university, was gone. And then she splendidly passed the entrance exam to an Ivy League university. Seeing my daughter about to start her college life this fall fills me with renewed emotion. As I near 46, busy in a good way with work, and still healthy, I'm motivated to keep pushing forward.